Yes. I think that'd be great.
Perfect, so I've been working with her.
Yeah.
Starting to talk about
No bike riding or anything.
Michael's with her as well, so.
My name is Michael Connick, and I'm the host of the monthly Writers Can Read. This is a very special Writers Can Read event in that we're going to be basically organizing it as a tribute to someone I think everybody in this room has known very, very well, Carter. And we're all, I personally myself am already missing her terribly. She was a big part of my life. I knew her for about 10 years, and she was a great supporter of my own writing. In fact, the reason I'm here tonight running Writers Can Read is because of Carter. Carter was one of the founders of Writers Can Read, along with Elliot Parker. And when Elliot Parker left the area to go to Ole Miss to take a position with them, Carter asked me, Michael, you have some computer skills. Could you just do the posters for Writers Can Read every month that Elliot used to do, and I'll take care of the rest? And I said, sure, I can do that. And so I did that for quite a few years, and then I started actually doing press releases for the event also. And then when Carter basically started getting some illnesses and so on, that she really didn't feel like she could continue to handle the scheduling part and the being the moderator role, she basically said, it's all yours. And so I've been doing my best to keep it going since then. So, but enough about me and Writers Can Read. It's really all about Carter. And so our first reader tonight is going to be Shelley, and each of our readers, there'll be 4 of them, is basically going to be spending some time talking about their experiences in interacting with Carter and what it meant to them, and then we'll actually read some of Carter's work that's of special meaning to the reader. So let's start off with Shelley.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Shelley Schiavone, and I'm speaking tonight because knowing Carter Taylor Seaton has truly enriched my life. I first became aware of Carter from the sculpture she exhibited at the Renaissance Art Gallery. I knew she was the niece of Eleanor Taylor, who was in the English department at Marshall University when I arrived to teach there in 1989. A quick aside about Eleanor's influence on me. Because of her, I read Gloria Steinem's book, Outrageous Acts in Everyday Rebellions, which Eleanor had used when she taught a biography class. I decided to use this same book when I taught the class, moving on to a full-scale biography of Steinem. Just 2 weeks ago, I received an email from a former student, now a professor, who told me she would never forget our biography class. I'm not exactly sure what she meant by that. Or sitting next to me when Gloria Steinem spoke at Marshall. This was about 20 years ago. So you just never know what you can set in motion. I gradually got to know Carter as I started attending Writers Can Read at Empire Books and then the West Virginia Writers Conference in Ripley. I read an autobiographical essay that she wrote in Patrick Grace's life writing class, and I have to say, I was amazed to find out that she had had a baby in her teens and that she had run marathons. One year I was invited to her New Year's Day birthday celebration at her house. I was happy to be included. Another time I was at Laura Bentley's, another local writer, for a small lunch at Christmas time with Carter and a couple of other writers. We were asked to bring a wrapped book that we would want someone else to read. The book I chose, a novel by Frank Conroy, no relation to Pat Conroy, whom she loved, got into Carter's hands. By this time, I had read her biography of Ken Heckler. I am now proud to say that I have read all of her books, including her memoir and her children's book. A few years ago, when I started coming to Writers Can Read regularly, I'd be invited to the meal at the Hall of Fame Cafe beforehand, which Carter would arrange. I guess here and at the West Virginia Writers Conference at Cedar Lakes is where I felt I was finally getting to know her well. I admired her outfits, her jewelry, her sense of humor, and her dedication to writing. She was elegant, hardworking, and kind. I knew she always read the author she'd be introducing at Writers Can Read. One of my favorite memories of Carter is watching her go into hysterics over a comic reading performed by Eric Fritzius. I went to many of her readings, including at least 3 when she was promoting her novel Guilt. We would talk in person or on Messenger about what we were reading and what she was writing. By this time, I was auditing creative writing classes at Marshall and writing memoir essays. I had started this at home in the summer of 2020 when I was desperate for something to do during COVID. I had always planned to write some kind of memoir, so I'm not saying that she inspired me to do this, but I have been inspired by her steady work and her determination to write, even while sick. And I'm happy to say that I now know and have befriended 4 generations of Taylor Seatons. And if I become friends with Max, that would be the 5th generation. So you know that's a goal of mine. This evening, I've chosen to read from her first novel, Father's Troubles. I was especially impressed with her imagining and conveying how it felt to be in prison. When I read it, I felt like I was there myself. And I know this is probably kind of a strange subject to be reading, but as I say, I just was really impressed by her skill at depicting and describing this experience of having to go to prison. And I looked at a few different pages to see which part I would read, and I decided on a couple of pages here. Just tell me how much time do I have left, do you know?
I would say you have about 11 minutes.
Oh, all right. I thought I was going to bring my phone up here, but there it is. Sorry. So this is from chapter 45 of Father's Troubles. It's page 396, in case you want to go home later and reread it. And the chapter is dated November 10th, 1930. This is about the man whose name is Lawrence in this book, who has been convicted of, I think it's embezzling or mishandling bank money, and so he is actually in Moundsville in West Virginia. At the sudden At the sudden rude alarm bell, Lawrence was jerked into wakefulness. He sat bolt upright in the dark, completely disoriented. Where am I? What is that horrible noise? A fire truck? It must be the middle of the night. Why is it dark? I know, Anna forgot to leave the bathroom light on. Where is she? Then it hit him. He fell back on his lumpy prison-issue pillow on the narrow upper bunk. Quick tears stung his sleep-matted eyes. As he turned toward the wall, hoping to go back to sleep and find it was a bad dream, the prison was flooded with light. With the flick of a remote switch, his cell went from impenetrable dark to a shadow-throwing half-light that barely illuminated its dingy details. In the distance, he heard a guard approaching from the far end of the cell block, running his wooden persuasion stick along the cell bars. "Get up, you lazy bastards," the guard repeated over and over. This was his morning greeting. Lawrence sat up again. He was unsure what to do next. Do I dress and go to breakfast? Where do we bathe? Do we bathe? Below him, dressed only in his skivvies, Bledsoe, that was his cellmate, Bledsoe was gathering up his towel and soap and putting on his shoes. As Lawrence had fallen asleep in his clothes, he had only to put on his shoes to be ready for the day. What do I do in here all day? He realized, however, that he didn't have a towel or soap of his own. Should I have brought toiletries from home? Will they give me soap and towels, Bledsoe, he asked. Yeah, I seem to recollect they do when your turn come for the showers, Bledsoe offered. When is that, Lawrence asked. Well, you're lucky. Today is our turn. Don't get a shower every day, just twice a week. Ours is Monday and Thursday. Lawrence could hardly believe what he was hearing. He hadn't skipped a daily shower or bath since he was a small boy. No wonder this place stinks. That's disgusting. I can't stand it. Where are the showers? Down at the end of the cell block. There's a whole row of them. Before Lawrence could carry this line of questioning any further, the guard returned, unlocking cells along the way. All right, you bastards, line up. Put your towel and soap on your heads. You know the routine. It's your turn to clean your filthy bodies. Since Lawrence didn't know the routine, he decided to follow Bledsoe's example, although Bledsoe hadn't actually offered to show him anything. He fell in line behind his cellmate and started toward the open cell door. "Where are you going in those clothes, son?" The guard blocked his way with his nightstick. "To the showers," Lawrence replied logically. Isn't that where he had just ordered them to go? "Then you'd better strip to your skivvies. No place to hang them clothes out there. And you sure want them to stay dry, don't you?" "Yes, sir," Lawrence answered quickly as he turned to take off his prison stripes. "Sir, I don't have soap or a towel. Will there be some in the shower room?" "Shower room?" he guffawed. "There ain't a shower room as such, son, but I reckon the guard in charge down there will be able to find you some soap." He jerked his thumb in the direction the line of men were walking. Lawrence shivered. He stepped into the cold concrete walled corridor and followed the guard to the far end of the cell block. As he neared the open area, he could hear the commingled sounds of splashing water and men's voices. Stepping around the corner, Lawrence saw 8 or 10 naked men standing in a line to the left, and 10 or 12 more washing under the shower heads that protruded from the end wall. He tried to avert his eyes, modesty being his nature, but he found himself staring in disbelief. This was not a shower room at all. It was simply the public area of the cell block, and here were nearly 24 men openly bathing or waiting to do so with no apparent sense of their exposure to anyone who walked by. Tables and chairs dotted the dry area. If you were so inclined, you could sit there and watch the mass showering, or ignore it and play cards as the naked parade passed by. Lawrence was appalled. He hadn't seen another man completely naked since his college days. The thought of exposing himself to such scrutiny was as embarrassing as seeing others do it. At least in college, there had been an actual shower room. "Hang your skivvies on those hooks, son," another guard instructed. "Here's your towel and soap. Don't lose them. Soap's dear." Lawrence glanced around, but he knew that finding a private spot in which to undress was futile. He quickly stepped out of his shorts and wrapped the skimpy, rough towel around his waist. It barely covered him. "If I just stare at the wall, I can get through this." The line moved quickly. Lawrence stepped into the harsh shower, shut his eyes, and let the tepid water cascade over his head. He bathed as quickly as possible, trying to put out of his mind the queue of men awaiting their turn. The soap stung his skin and smelled vaguely like chemicals. He recalled wistfully the round bar of English Yardley soap he was accustomed to using. Mild and faintly scented, its fragrance matched his aftershave. That, too, was a luxury of the past. What about shaving? They certainly won't give us razors. I can't abide a beard. Calls of "hurry up, we're freezing our asses" snapped him out of his own thoughts. He stepped out of the shower, picked up the towel he'd left on the stool, and began to dry off. "Move to the right, buddy," yelled a man waiting to get to Lawrence's shower head. Now Lawrence could see the pattern. Enter from the left, take the next available shower head, shower quickly and step into the open area on the right to dry, return to the left for your skivvies, put them on and go back to your cell. The whole routine took only a few minutes. Lawrence was in the habit of a leisurely and deliberate toilet. It was often the most productive time to contemplate vexing problems. Now he just wanted to get through this nightmare. If he had a problem to solve now, he certainly couldn't do it with 24 pairs of eyes and an overhead guard with a drawn rifle watching his every move. He reached for a pair of shorts, but quickly realizing they weren't his, drew back his hand as if to avoid being burned. The idea of handling the underwear of other men made him nauseous. He glanced at the other inmates. He hoped none had seen his mistake. Satisfied that he hadn't been seen, he looked more carefully, found his own shorts, and quickly put them on his still damp body. I'm going to just close by saying I think Carter was fearless in what she wrote. The fact that she wrote this scene, I think, was pretty amazing. If she thought it served the book, I think she wrote it and wrote it extremely well. So thank you.
Thank you, Joey. Our next reader is going to be Hannah Hillen.
Have me nameless, an amateur in writing and art, driven to try and capture experiences, emotions, making sense of it all based on present juxtaposition. Carter never treated me that way. Carter always encouraged me to read at these events when I attended. At the open mic portion, I would see her side glance inquisitively with her smile that wrinkled the tip of her nose. Embarrassed with foolish cowardice, I would waver on. It wasn't you all I was afraid of disappointing. Carter Taylor Seaton, my Nana, mentor, and friend. I wrote this poem. It's called Taking Stock. Impulsively reflecting on pictures of you, looking over my collection of memories, taking stock in what I have, taking account of what I have to hold on to as the uncertainty of how long I have mounts, knowing the depth of treasure you have bestowed on me, my heart overflowing from the brim with love from you. To witness a woman like you, your resolve, someone who knew what it was like to find themselves over again and again by their own definition, someone no stranger to solemn silences. To call you by your role, on gender or otherwise, would do no justice for the ceilings you could shatter and the walls you could shake only by holding your own in a man's world. Matriarch at her finest decorum, a personalized style that popped with vibrant collars, patterned pants or jackets, ceramic, brass, copper, wood, antique jewelry, from seemingly lost artists' histories. You were always noticed when entering a room, and your floral scent would linger on like the warmth of your goodbyes. You are a woman of a generation that has always had difficulty accepting me as I am, seeing me for my true quality. You saw me. You always saw me. And to be seen by a woman of your era and caliber was something I always needed, yet never really understood until now. You loved, encouraged, and believed in me in all my endeavors. Therefore, all of my accomplishments and roles, like a grandmother, mentor, friend, I had never had before. I will miss our conversations over coffee, looking out over water or roses. I will miss the unspoken understanding and silent existential camaraderie, wondering if I should have shared more, but knowing you somehow knew all the same. I will regret all the times I was in too big of a hurry to give you all of my time, knowing but not understanding how limited it would be. You never know what picture of someone you love will be the last one you have, to linger on with gentle fingertips, as if you'd lose that too while taking stock. Thank you. I'm going to be reading from her second book, Amo Amasa Mott, An Unconventional Love Story. This chapter spoke to me because it's about her commemorating the loss of a friend and processing grief, and I just found it very poignant and beautiful, and it resonated with me at this time, like many of her writings. This is page 285. The chapter's titled April 1988. Mary Kate retrieved the neatly folded cloth from her sewing table and unfurled it. The large quilt panel, heavier on one end than the other, flopped awkwardly to the floor and landed in a heap. She dropped to her knees and crawled across it, smoothing the folds and straightening the raw edges as she moved. Under her weight, the stiff canvas background scraped her knees. With the panel fully open, she edged backward to the bare floor and sat cross-legged, studying her creation. The tribute panel for Theo, which she would donate to the AIDS quilt, pleased her now, although she had struggled for weeks to get it just the way she wanted. She'd first made a miniature, rearranging doll clothing and bits of fabric until she was satisfied with the composition. Figuring out the scale had been the hardest part. The panel's required size, 3 by 6 feet, couldn't accommodate a full-sized figure along with the rest of her design, so Mary Kate had to calculate just how tall Theo could be. Finally, she had determined that if she used the clothes of a young boy, he would fit. Now to letter his name and the dates. I need a stencil. If I do it freehand, I'm afraid I'll make a mess. In the upper left, she had painted a huge luminous circle with pointed shafts radiating from the circumference, the way children usually paint the sun. She'd read somewhere that people who died, then came back to life, often reported seeing or going toward a white light at the moment of death. I wonder if he saw the light. I think I'll add glitter. A gold path meandered down the panel from the shimmering light to the figure below. The metallic paint was carefully patterned to simulate Dorothy's yellow brick road. Was Theo right? Is he strolling through heaven on gold-paved streets? Theo's fabric effigy stood at the lower right. His feet were on the path, but he was turned away from heaven, still gazing earthward. He wore the outfit in which she'd seen him last. Knife-creased khakis, navy blazer, a red silk scarf around his neck, and a framed photo of his girls under one arm. With his free arm, he was waving to someone. In Mary Kate's mind, of course, he was waving to her. With fabric paint, she had captured perfectly the mocha shade of Theo's skin. However, she had omitted his facial features. She tried dozens of times to put his expression on paper, but none of her attempts had caught the true Theo. In the end, she had decided his face wasn't really necessary. She realized that his soul shone through in his wave, in the carriage of his head, and in the way he protected the photograph. But now, as she stared at her handiwork, she began to second-guess her choice. Does he look strange without any features? People might think I really didn't know him, or that I couldn't remember what he looked like. What do you care, Mary Kate? How you felt about him is what matters. This is your tribute to Theo. Don't worry about what people think. That's been your trouble all your life. You worry about what people think. You left home because of what you thought people would think. Hell, you even worried about what the Goodwill lady thought when you kept going in to buy clothes for this thing. She smiled as she recalled the number of times she had shopped. The red scarf had been an easy find, the first item she bought. Next, she found the pants, small and in perfect condition. Theo wouldn't have been caught dead or alive in worn khakis. The blazer was the hardest. At all the stores, the men's jackets were either too large, the fabrics too worn, or they weren't double-breasted. It had to be perfect. Nothing else would do. The day she found it, or rather it found her, was etched deeply in her memory. No sooner had she entered the store than she heard a voice calling, Miss, I think I found what you was wanting." Mary Kate had ignored the call. Of course, but the voice became more insistent. "Honey, I got one. I think it's just what you was looking for." Curious, Mary Kate finally turned toward the voice. The blue-aproned clerk had nearly run headlong into her. "Oh, honey, I was hoping you'd come in today," she said. "You come so often that when I seen that little blue jacket on the rack, I said to myself, I sure hope that reddy-haired woman comes in today. You know we can't hold nothing back, not even for good customers, so I was praying you'd showed up." All the time she was talking, the clerk had been steering Mary Kate to the $3 rack of boys' jackets. Beaming, she reached between two linen polyester blends and pulled out the richest-looking navy cashmere blazer Mary Kate had ever seen. Mary Kate touched the shoulder instinctively, brushed the nap back and forth. It felt like kitten's fur. She removed it from the hanger for closer inspection. Not a flaw. It even smelled dry cleaner fresh. Remarkably, the heavy brass buttons looked new, their deeply molded eagle designs in perfect flight formation down obligatory double rows, size 10. "It's perfect. Thank you for protecting it," Mary Kate winked. The clerk had suggested, "Your son'll just love this nice jacket," she pronounced nice, with an extra long I. But unwilling to explain her mission, Mary Kate had said simply, "Sorry, I don't have children." Then embarrassed, she had scurried to the register with the jacket, tucked proprietarily under her arm. Once in line, she nearly developed buyer's remorse. Seemed such a shame to cut it up. Theo's own blazer wasn't nearly this nice, yet it's fitting to give him the best, even if he'll never know it. Now she was glad she had kept it. It was the least I could do, I think. I let Theo down at the end. I know he didn't feel like talking after a while, but I could have sent more cards, written more notes, called his mom more often. I regret more than anything that I didn't even know he had died until after the funeral. I wish I'd known. Wish I could have been there for him. Suddenly, Nick's face swam into her mind. Impulsively, Mary Kate stretched out on top of the cloth Theo figure and buried her face in the loose end of his scarf. She slid her arms under the edges of the panel and pulled the whole thing to her in an embrace. "I'm so sorry, Theo," she whispered. "Forgive me." Thank you.
Okay, our next reader is going to be Bonnie Proudfoot.
Hi all. Thank you so much, Michael, for having me. And those two readings are just so moving and wonderful. So I'm Bonnie Proudfoot. I'm from Athens, Ohio, and I didn't really have the benefit of knowing Carter for very long, only about the last, say, 5 years or so. I first met her in 2019, and it was at the Festival of the Book, and she was at the West Virginia Writers Table, and with this book right here, and I came up to her and I said, you know, I used to be a member of West Virginia Writers, and she said, well, why aren't you anymore? Like right away, you know. And I said, well, I live in Ohio, I don't know. Oh, come on, of course you can be a member of West Virginia Writers. And there was nobody, you know, the sessions were going on, and really the book fair was pretty quiet. And I said, pull up a chair. And I said, what's going on in West Virginia Writers these days? And for me, it was West Virginia Writers. It's an organization that I belonged to in the 1980s when I lived in West Virginia and lived in Fairmont. And I used to drive down, and it was a thrill to go to the conferences at Cedar Lake in those days. And of course, in my days since I left West Virginia in 1996 and moved to Roanoke for a while, then moved to Athens, Ohio, and thought, well, you know, I couldn't show my art at Ripley because I wasn't a West Virginia native anymore, and I thought, well, I can't go back to West Virginia Writers either. And she said, come on down. And I took a look at her book, and I said, hippie homesteaders? What's up with that? And she said, oh, I went around the state, and I interviewed people who used to do the Cedar Lakes Arts and Craft Fair. And I said, wait a minute, I did the Cedar Lakes Arts and Craft Fair. And she said, and Harper's Ferry. I did Harper's Ferry. And what about a Mountaineer Week and some of those other wonderful festivals? And there was a festival in Charleston, I can't remember. And next thing you know, we pretty much spent the whole afternoon. Every time nobody was at she was selling books left and right, of course, but every time nobody was at the table, we talked about her research for this book, and I told her, I confided in her that I had a book that had been accepted for publication. It was my first novel, written while I was, started while I was living in West Virginia, and then worked on for 20 years while I was teaching and at various places. And she said, tell me about it, of course, she said that. And she said, I want you to keep me posted. I want to know more about this novel. I'd like to have you maybe read it some point in time, you know. And I thought, no one has said that to me ever. She was just that generous and that warm and that kind. And so we kept in touch, kept mostly in touch on Facebook. I joined West Virginia Writers right away. Next summer I went to and I guess it was maybe 2019 or 2020, one of those years where they didn't have the conference right away, but maybe they had something online, I think. Yeah, there was a year that they did it online, and they even had the Putnam County Pickers playing on Zoom, I remember. So fantastic. And I wrote to Carter right away, and I said, I feel so good being back connected to this organization. And by then my book had come out, and it did pretty well. And I gave a online presentation to the West Virginia Festival of the Book, and she invited me for the next year when they did it in person at Cedar Lakes to come. And when I got to Cedar Lakes, I was trepidatious, you know. I was a brand new novelist, didn't know anyone, felt a little like an outsider, wasn't sure that I really belonged here. She introduced me to everyone, just as kind as could be. The fellow who was the head of West Virginia Writers, Kathy Manley, another presenter, you know, and I just wrote her the longest thank you note afterwards, and she wrote me back immediately. And then I was so honored. She asked me to blurb her book, The Other Morgans, and so I read the manuscript and immediately had questions and started writing back and forth. How come you chose this point of view, and how much I loved AJ, her character, and what a fantastic story it was, how it talked about culture and history and inheritance. And she said, well, there was this old family house that I had in my family, and it kind of gave me goosebumps for me to start to understand the personal journey and the way her life really had some of those same connections that showed up in this book. Anyway, I loved the book, and I said, this novel is really going to go places, and it did. It was a bronze medal winner for one, and it was a finalist for another award, an AGT award, and the Independent Press bronze medal winner, and I wasn't the least bit surprised. So I'm going to read a little bit from the prologue, and I'll tell you. First of all, I fell in love with AJ, and as a title character, she is dynamic, and she's wonderful, and she's faced with this giant challenge, which you're going to hear about. And you get the feeling that she is unstoppable, really. But she has to make a pretty big decision, as you'll hear. Okay, so I'll read a little bit of this book, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what charmed me so much. At the edge of the pasture stood a young woman in jeans so tight her mother often questioned how she got them on. Who hasn't heard that? I just like to say. A single black braid split her back like an exclamation point mark. In her left hand, she held an envelope from the Fayette County Sheriff's Office. Her heart sank as she stared at it. She knew what was inside, the farm's annual tax bill. Each year, she dreaded its arrival. Opening it, she realized the amount was even more than last year's. How the hell is that possible? This farm ain't worth a penny more than it was when Daddy died. I sure as shit didn't vote for no tax increase. Tears sprang, but she blinked them away. Unless her garden crop was spectacular, or she was able to sell one of the cows, she knew she'd once again be pinching from her monthly mine widow's pension to accumulate enough to pay the full amount before the October deadline. Things like a new insulated coat to replace the one she dripped on the barn door, porch roof paint, and a new high tunnel for the garden would have to wait. The fear of losing the family farm for delinquent taxes was an albatross that had hung around her neck since her husband Jeff's death in a mining accident 4 years earlier. Since then, she'd become her own Robin Hood, taken from one envelope of cash to fill the empty one meant for taxes. So far, she'd managed, but each year her anxiety returned with the mail. She replaced the sheriff's greeting in its envelope and put it in her back pocket. She sighed again and opened a cream-colored envelope addressed to Mrs. Audrey Jane Porter. The envelope's paper felt rich and thick, unlike most of the mail she received. She turned it over. On the back was an embossed gold crest and a wax seal. What the hell is that? Looks like a puddle of candle drippings. I had never seen such on a letter. She had to open it just to see who would send such a thing. Inside was a sheet of official-looking letterhead. At the top, a gold crest matching the one on the envelope wrinkled the stiff vellum page. She ran her sweaty fingertip over it, causing a smudge. Instantly regretting the blemish, she wiped her hands on her jeans. As she read, the letter ruffled in the breeze that was blowing a dust devil across the parched earth. August was heating up to be a scorcher, and a swirl of dust reminded her how much the garden needed rain. She skimmed the letter quickly. It made no sense. Reminded her of the publisher's clearinghouse notices her mom received that she always pitched, knowing they were bogus. She would have tossed this one too, but was intrigued by that crest. I don't know if your father or grandfather ever told you, but your grandfather, James Ramsey Morgan, had a stepbrother, Jackson Parkhurst Morgan, who lived here in Dillard County, Virginia. He would have been your great-uncle. AJ, as she'd been called since childhood, stared into the distance as if searching for the place the letter spoke of. I don't know a damn soul in Dillard County, Virginia, let alone the rest of the state. I never heard of no relatives anywhere but here on Turkey Knob. As she lowered the sheet, the horse dancing at the end of the oval riding ring caught her attention. Leaning on the fence, her elbows rested in the cradles Gunnar had chewed into the top rails. Now some of those boards looked scalloped. Wondering why he did that, she stared again toward the tree-covered mountains. The work-thinned young woman often stood in that spot in the late afternoon after her chores were done. It felt like a sanctuary to her. It was her way of winding down. There she could savor the ancient maples, oaks, and poplars that blanketed the hills, protecting her. Spring's tender new green gave her hope, renewed her faith in the soil. In the fall, the glorious riot of color made her heart swell. But she feared this year the drought would stifle that familiar rise of gold, crimson, and orange. Even the stark winter view always invigorated her. Black branches etching charcoal designs on the snow-covered hillsides. These were her mountains, her place, home. I guess I'll read. I haven't been keeping time. How are we doing here?
You get 5 minutes more.
Okay, well, so,
And I'm in such a generous mood, I can even give you 10.
I should have brought my phone over here. What I wanted to say about this book and this writing is, I lived, up a hollow in West Virginia. I had a horse. That horse cribbed on the rails of that we tried to keep her in. And, every day I looked around and I saw the world as like a canvas, almost I could build a house here, I could put a barn here, I could put a shed here, but it was, in a way, that sense of freedom and independence. And AJ, this character, has this kind of wrenching choice. If you've read the book, I don't want to ruin it for you, but does she want to give this all up? Well, we hear, right from the start, we hear what she loves about this place. And every single word from the very first prologue of this book struck me as lived. It struck me as real. It struck me as someone who's experienced firsthand. And oddly enough, I went to college in Roanoke, even though I lived in Fairmont. I went to Hollins, and I used to drive to Virginia immediately as soon as you cross the Virginia line. The world is different. It's not the same in West Virginia as it was in Virginia. And that's another absolutely wonderful thing captured by this book, that sense of unbalance between having a sense of home and freedom and home place, and then, in a way, the restrictions and the rules and the guidelines that you sort of have to pass muster to inherit this mansion and this working farm. Even the difference between the two farms, right? So I just want to say that Carter was just a fantastic mentor for me, and I always felt encouraged in her presence. I never felt like I had enough time with her, always, and some of the wonderful things she said just gave me goosebumps. And I feel honored to be able to have blurbed this book and also found so much connection to her through her writing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bonnie. And our last featured reader is going to be Kat Pleska.
Hello, everyone. How are you on this cold evening?
Cold.
Cold, yeah, certainly. I think I met Carter probably about 15 years ago. I knew about her before that as a writer, and since I am also a writer, that word travels in a writing community. Even though I'm not from Huntington, but they've kind of let me come here and do some things. So I'm very appreciative of that. But I probably met Carter through West Virginia Writers. I had come in as president in 2010, and I'm pretty sure that's how I came to know her, through that. But over the years, we started knowing each other better and better and better, and running into kind of the same circles kind of thing, writerly circles. I became president and editor-in-chief of Mountain State Press, and in 2019, I agreed to publish Richard and her's book. We were legends in our own mind. I thought it was just such a fun book. And of course, I remember the civic centers and seeing those acts and that sort of thing. So it was a lot of fun. And she wanted to capture those stories of Richard's before they were gone. And so I thought it was a wonderful thing to collaborate with between her and Richard. And eventually I became part of her writing community in the sense that we would be together in groups, critiquing one another's work. And I was not involved in the reading of Guilt or the other Morgans, but eventually Carter decided that she wanted to write a memoir. Well, that's my bailiwick. I'm a memoirist, so I was very flattered that Carter, in all of her writerly expertise, would ask me questions about, how to do memoir and that sort of thing. We had wonderful, wonderful conversations about writing memoir. And I know other people read some of her memoir pieces, but another woman, Lynn Squires, and I would often get, first crack at the chapters. And she shopped it around, but I told her, I said, Carter, if you don't have any luck, I said, you come back to me. I said, I would be honored to publish this fantastic memoir in Mountain State Press. And eventually that is exactly what happened. And that's this book right here, Wednesday's Child. Of course, that's Carter when she was 2. And wonderful, wonderful photo. And so unfortunately, Carter didn't get to read from it and, go around the reading circles with it and be at the book festival in Charleston with it. But it will continue to be for sale. And there are some books here if anybody wants to buy one. But I thought what I would read from tonight is actually a chapter of her novel in progress. So we won't get to hear the end of it, unfortunately. But I asked Dorothy Ann, I said, do you think this will be okay? Because to me, well, Carter, when she got her diagnosis in 2023, she said to me, she said, I don't know whether I should keep writing or whether I just spend time with family. And I said, Carter, you wake up every morning and you do whatever you want to do in this world. If you want to write, you write. If you want to see family, give them a call. I know they'll be there for you. I said, but honey, you do whatever you want, whatever makes you happy. Pretty soon, she was back into writing, which she loved. She loved the writing. And so this is chapter 10 of a book in progress, a novel in progress that she was writing. It's based on a little bit of family history. I'll just say briefly that these 3 young girls, the mother could no longer take care of them. And so the girls went to different places and they were trying to work their way through their lives and figure out what to do. This is chapter 10. And one of the girls is named Maisie and is dated April 25th, 1934. This morning at breakfast, Sue announced it was time for spring cleaning. I'd known that was coming. I'd seen the soft fuzz on the tree branches that makes them look sort of pink before their baby green leaves pop out. We'd done big cleanings the past few years, so I knew one of my jobs would be washing the windows. Sue had been saving up newspapers. That was another clue. It was a beautiful morning, and the air smelled fresh, like sheets do when you take them off the line. We started as soon as Teddy got on the school bus. Sue was doing the inside so she could watch Justine, but the outsides of the windows on the first floor was my job. I had a bucket full of vinegar water and a stack of papers on one of the metal chairs from the porch. Sue had taught me to use a rag to wash the glass and then use the wrapped up papers to dry them. She said newspaper wouldn't leave streaks or fuzz like rags would. Most days I never had time to read the newspaper like I used to when Mama would bring them home after work. The ladies she cleaned for would let her have them if they'd finished reading them. Now, since I never went back to school, it was the only way I could learn anything, except for sneaking Teddy's school books, which I did whenever I could. I'd offer to help him with his homework because I already knew all that first grade stuff, but that didn't teach me anything new. Reading the papers did. So when I had a whole stack of papers in front of me and Sue wasn't watching, I'd read before I used them. Sometimes I read just the headlines. So I knew President Roosevelt was working hard to get people's jobs. Sometimes I read the comics. I loved the Cats and Jammer Kids and Terry and the Pirates. Sometimes I read the society pages where I saw beautiful women in wedding gowns or groups of girls all dressed up at a luncheon. Those were my favorites. Each time I wondered what it would be like to live that kind of life. It wasn't that my life was bad. Sue and Sam had taken me in when Mama left, and I was grateful for that. I had new clothes and plenty to eat, but it was country living with lots of chores. I knew I'd never go to a fancy luncheon or have a fancy wedding that got written up in the Huntington Advertiser, but reading about them was like reading a good book. I could dream it was me. I finished the windows in the living and dining rooms and moved my stuff to the kitchen windows. Now, one window was clean and ready to dry. When I reached for my next page, I saw a picture of a group of kids around a piano. There were 4 girls and 2 boys. One of the little girls was sitting on the piano bench, and beside her was a woman I guess must have been their teacher. They looked so happy, all dressed up with big smiles on their faces. The headline said they'd given a recital, which was attended by their families and friends. I guess that meant they were showing off what they had learned. Under the picture, from left to right, they also listed their names. I had started to crumple up the page when I looked more closely at the girl at the piano. She had blonde, curly hair and a smile that made her look very pleased with herself. That smile seemed familiar. I looked at the names, and there it was, Hannah Townsend. The last name was wrong, of course, but I knew it was my little sister, Hannah. I could hardly breathe. I just stood and stared at it. Finally, I took the page, folded it up, and stuffed it inside my shirt. I wanted to run to Sue right then to show it to her, but I was afraid she'd be mad because I'd left off my work. So while I worked on the kitchen windows, I tried to imagine what kind of life my sister was living. Her new parents must be very rich if they can give her piano lessons. Most people still don't have jobs. She looks all dressed up, too. Did she ever get her new dress at Anderson Newcomb, where I saw her so long ago? Are those her friends? They look rich, too. Finally, I couldn't stand it any longer. I had moved to the bedroom and could see Sue inside. I put down my rag and went inside, patting my chest to be sure the paper was still there. She turned when she saw me. "Finished already?" she said, looking worn out. "Not quite, but I have something to show you." I reached inside my blouse and unfolded the newspaper page. Pointing to the picture, I said, "I think this is my sister." I watched her face as she looked closely at it. "Oh, Maisie, just because she's named Hannah doesn't mean she's your Hannah. There have to be lots of blonde Hannahs in the world, lots even in Huntington." She handed it back to me and went on washing. But I recognized her smile. Remember when I thought I saw her in the store and I just knew it was her? I was right then and I'm right now. Not every Hannah has that crooked little smile like mine does. I know it's her. Well, even if it is, she has a new life now. Not the same life you do. So you need to forget about her. That life is over. Yours is here with us, with Teddy and Justine. Now get back to those windows before it gets too dark to see the streaks. She turned away, and I knew she'd never believe me. She didn't then, and she didn't now. But I knew. Before I went back to my chores, I took the page and put it in the Little Women along with my mother's postcard. From now on, I'm going to check the papers every day. I'll find her one day. I know I will. That weekend when Sam came home, I overheard Sue tell him what I'd found. I could tell by her tone I was right. She would never believe me. Sam had a different view. He said, if she wants to go look for her family, good riddance. She ought to be more grateful, but she's nearly grown now. If she thinks she can survive on her own, I say good riddance. Sue argued back. I was glad to hear that. No, she'd never do that. I think she'll never get over missing her sisters, and I don't blame her. But she knows she's got a good thing here. She's almost an adult, true, but that doesn't mean she could survive on her own. Even people with good skills still can't find jobs. She doesn't have any, except for being a housekeeper or a babysitter. Don't pay much, those jobs. Would I leave? I never thought about that. I knew I'd find Claire Marie and Hannah someday, but I sure didn't have a plan right at that moment. Now I began to wonder if I needed one. With Teddy in school and Justine not a baby anymore, did Sue really still need me? Sam sounded like he'd be just as happy if I did leave. I went to bed that night more than a little bit scared. It must have been seeing her picture that triggered it. I hadn't had the nightmare in a long time, but there it was again. I woke up sobbing, Hannah's face drifting without expression in the water. Only minutes before, she'd been struggling, calling for help, and I'd been trying to reach her, but then she quit, just gave up and floated away down the river. It was so real. Yet once I jerked awake, I knew it wasn't. Hadn't I just seen her picture in the paper? Knew she was safe with a new life? Maybe this dream was a way of telling me that. In my dream, she looked serene once she quit fighting the water. Maybe that meant she was happy without me, without her sisters. That made me cry again. But I wasn't ready to give up finding her. I vowed to myself that I would. Someday, somehow, I'd find her and Claire Marie. Thank you.
Well, this is actually moving along faster than I thought, so I'm going to do something I really hadn't intended on doing, talking about Carter myself. Yeah, Carter, there's a theme here of Carter and West Virginia writers. Well, Carter drew me into that web as well. In fact, I ended up serving as treasurer and for a 2-year term and being on the board of directors and doing 6 different presentations at the fall and summer conferences. So a few years before this book came out, before it even had a title, Carter was talking to me one day, and she was telling me that she was going to write this book, and it was going to be a book about a young black man in Georgia unjustly convicted. And she said, all of a sudden, and you're going to be in the book. And I said, oh, okay. And I sort of let it go. I mean, how do you respond to that? So, but I was waiting for this book to come out, of course. And when it did, it finally came out with the title, Guilt. And so I started reading it to see, well, where can I find myself? Will I find myself? Will I be able to recognize myself? And lo and behold, by page 54, I come upon this sentence: at the state's table sat the prosecutor, Riley Connick, and his assistant, Jefferson Doyle. And just to make sure that I got the message, nowhere afterwards in the book is he ever referred to as Riley. It's always Connick. So, for instance, state your name, Connick said. Claude Robert Stanley. And how long have you owned Stanley's juke joint? Probably 8 years. Just closed it after his voice trailed off as Connick interrupted him. So I often think of Carter smiling and maybe even laughing as she wrote this section of the book. Okay, well, we have time for audience members to come up and maybe, you know, 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever. If you would like to talk about Carter, of your interactions with her, about what she meant to your life. She touched a lot of lives. Like I said, she did a lot for me. It was extremely encouraging, just as really as all the readers have talked about. I don't know if Michael or any of the other family members want to say anything.
I couldn't say anything without just crying.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
And I was finally glad to meet Michael. Under horrible circumstances, but I had heard a lot about you from Carter. She talked about you a lot. So, would anyone else like to come up and say anything about Carter?
I will.
Sure. Come on up, Marcia.
So first, if you guys know me, you know that I hate public speaking. But I met Carter through Patchwork Writers. That's, I think, the first group that I encountered her in. And she was working on the Ken Heckler book at that point. And they met monthly. So every month we would come in, and she would either be really super excited about the section she was working on, or she'd be really fired up about the section that she was working on. And it always amazed me, just her enthusiasm for that. And then, of course, Writers Can Read, West Virginia Writers, et cetera, et cetera. And she and I actually ended up serving on the board of West Virginia Writers at the same time in different roles. And I would ride to Ripley with her. And the routine was, is I would go to Starbucks and get the coffee. She would get a cafe latte with 2 Splendas, still remember her order. And we would go up to Ripley, go to the board meetings, whatever we needed to do, and come back. So it's like an hour and a half up one way, hour and a half back, that she and I would just talk incessantly. And just the wisdom and knowledge and stories that she would share was amazing. The only thing that used to scare me, though, she would call it cutting the curb, and she would kind of like drift over into the other lane, and I was always like, oh, okay, here's the lane, you know. So that always made me a little bit nervous, but it was all right. And then we continued with Patchwork Writers. That group, unfortunately, doesn't meet right now. But when she was working on the We Are Legends, that was probably the most excited I think I have ever seen her. She would come in and she would bring like a couple different stories, and she'd be like, okay, do you want to hear the one about Elvis, or do you want to hear the one about Sly and the Family Stone? So she would always give us the choice of what we wanted to hear. And I enjoyed listening to her so much. She is going to be so missed. And then my final thing is, the first time that she invited me to her birthday/New Year's Day party, I called my sister immediately, and I was like, you're never going to believe what just happened. I was like, Carter invited me to her party. I was so excited. I was in my 30s, heading into my 40s, and I felt like I'd finally been invited to the adult table. It was that kind of thing for me. I loved her dearly. I'm going to miss her so much, and I thank you all for sharing her with us.
Anyone else like to say anything? Sure, John?
For those of you that I haven't met, I'm John Hash. I live in Huntington. I publish books, and I write a few books now and then. I think I hold the record tonight, though, for the longest anybody has known Carter Seaton, except for Michael. I've known her for 48 years. I met her in 1976, and it's a long time ago. One of the treasures of age is you have so many really vivid memories and good ones. I tossed about as to what to say tonight. I just wanted to say something, and I decided to read to you something that I thought she would have said to you. Pardon me. This is a message of hope and affection. It's for Richard, Dorothy Ann, Michael, Jimmy, Jim, the rest of her family, and her best friends. You people who are gathered tonight, her best friends. This goes back a long way. I may tell you the story of it later, but I just want to read this while I can get through it. Somewhere, my love, there will be songs to sing, although the snow covers the hope of spring. Somewhere a hill blossoms in green and gold, and there are dreams, all that your heart can hold. Someday we'll meet again, my love. Someday when the spring breaks through, you'll come to me out of the long ago, warm as the wind, soft as the kiss of snow. Till then, my sweet, think of me now and then. Godspeed, my love, till you are mine again. Thank you.
Anyone else? Sure.
I think I can. Probably do like my brother. I'm Jimmy Seaton. And everyone knows my mom is an artist or a writer or whatever, but I'm a business guy, so I'm going to toughen up and give you the business guy side. I graduated Marshall, 86, moved to Florida. Beautiful little island called Longboat Key. I got a job as the food and beverage manager of the Hilton. Beautiful property, still is. We had an event going on that was, by all mathematical possibilities, was not going to be successful with all the different things we had going on. We had a beach, beautiful beachfront. We had meeting rooms. We had wedding rooms. We had all this stuff going on. I'm in charge of all of it, food and beverage-wise. A few months out of college, but I'm prepared. I'm talking to her, and I'm like, Mom, I can't imagine. I got 49 people. I need 60. I got this. I need that. It's just not going to happen. How can it happen? Not going to happen. Now, most of y'all don't know, she was a business person, very successful business person. John, you know that. And in many angles, in many towns. I'm like, how? She goes, Jimmy, you know you eat an elephant. I'm like, what the F kind of stupid statement is that? She goes, okay, you've got an elephant to eat. It's yours alone. I know you. It will be eaten by the end of that day or that event. How are you going to eat the elephant? I'm like, come on, please. She goes, Jimmy, you're going to do it one bite at a time. I said, yeah, okay. Well, we bit that elephant, blah, blah, blah. 40 years later, 4 months ago, she's back in the hospital. I had a little event come through on that island. We had 3 events. We had 1 hurricane came through and rained. Flooded areas that had never been flooded before. My property, we were fine with that. My business, everything was fine with that. Next one came in, and if you can picture an island, these folks know well, that I've stood on the same boat dock for half of my life. It's gone up a little. We've never had the big one. We had a storm surge that was 8.2 feet high. I'm standing on my dock, and my boat's up here. Big ass boat up here. It got destroyed. Cars got destroyed. House got destroyed. Business got destroyed. Blah, 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 blah. Mom's in the hospital. I can't get up here. I'm like, Mom, I got to clean this all up. I got people and businesses. She's in the hospital. All this torn up. She says, Jimmy, you're going to do it one bite at a time. We got to put back together. Boat's still on the bottom of the bay. I still got to clear that up. Got the cars thrown away. Got the house thrown away. Dumpsters full of stuff thrown away. And I got that bottom of the house dried up and got the doors put back on. And I came up here to be with her for the last few weeks. But that's how I always saw her. You got to do something. You do it. One bite at a time. And that's how I did it. That's how you do it. That's how we all do it. But that's my side of her. I'm not artistic at all. Couldn't draw a stick figure. Written 4 poems in my whole life. Got none of that. It skips a generation. I don't know. This boy's got it. She's got it. They all got it. The others got it. I got nothing. I could shine up a nice car, and that's that's about it. But that's the side, and it's so funny because with all these tributes and stuff, I never really got the your mom was a great business person tribute. I think you just take it for granted because she really bloomed afterwards. Because everybody can run a business. Well, no, they can't. Everybody can do this. Well, no, they can't. But people take that for granted, and that was what I got from her. So, it's great to hear from all of you all.
Anyone else? All right, well, thank you. Oh,
Can I ask Kat a question about the book? Do
Yes.
you know if she had the whole thing plotted out? Like, did she know what was going to happen?
I think so.
Yeah.
Do you know?
I didn't have the outline.
Oh,
We were
okay.
just getting.
She's got it, she was still writing up to the very end.
Does she find the sister? I'm assuming that
Yes,
she
she
finds
does.
the sister.
It's a story, it's a story. But she's got several more chapters written on her laptop, and I don't know what is gonna become of that.
I'm just curious as to what was going to happen with Maisie and the
Yeah,
sister.
we look for books.
yes.
Well, and
Yes,
I
we
thought for all of y'all that have read her memoirs, I thought her memoirs starts basically at age 15. And the little book that probably only some of you have read about me and Mary Ann, because it was just like kind of that cute little book. That's like how you get up to the 15-year-old that you meet at that, and you're like, well, what is that troublemaker little girl? And that's how you get that. So I see that as the prequel to the memoirs, and I wish that there's, in fact, I said to my sister, I wish there's some way that we could get, because the memoirs, not to be a spoiler for anybody, but it basically ends up with, I've been diagnosed with this horrific disease, is it worth a fight? And I think that's a whole story in itself afterwards, because those of you who were there for that journey, it was almost a couple of years ago, and it changed a lot of our lives, but the thing that I got was that she did fight it, she did decide, yeah, I'm going to do it, I got some stuff to do, and she did decide that, and she had basically a full year, Michael, almost a full year of remission.
Yeah.
I mean, we went from, taking turns, everyone you're seeing here, taking her to doctor appointments and everything, to, no, I'm taking myself. I'm like, what do you mean you're taking yourself? You're not driving to Barbersville. Yes, I am. Okay, well, I mean, so to me, that's a whole story right there, because when you're faced with that, wow, it's gonna get me. My time has come. We've all seen it happen, God, friends, relatives, whatever. And it's usually stair step down. Let's be honest. It's usually a stair step down. She got to ride a little plateau for about a year of standing there. She knew the stair step was still down, but it wasn't. But she got to ride that for a while, and that I think was a blessing, because she got to say everything to everyone, see people do stuff. Went to Cedar Lakes again? Are you kidding me? She's like, I'm going to Ripley. I'm like, what, are you kidding me? What are we talking about? You're going to Ripley? No. But yes, she did. Yes.
When's
So,
the
I mean,
last time you told her she
that's
couldn't
the
do
story.
something and she listened?
Never. Nor her for us either, but exactly true. It was a blessing for me, because I got to come up here 2 years ago and got to move up here part-time. So that was a blessing for me, because all of them got her on a daily basis, and I moved away. She moved in the 80s, and I moved in the 80s, and we lived at best 500 miles apart. So that was a blessing. But I think there's a story to be told in that last, whether it's a chapter, a whole nother book, and I'm no author, I don't know who the heck would do it, but there is a story, whether it's just, a compilation of people's paragraph of what they got to do with my mom after they thought, it was over. Because that's a blessing, most of us just, she had that little pause, and that's a blessing. We should all hope for it.
Well, maybe someone someday will tackle the biography of Carter Seaton Taylor.
You'll have to run it by my brother, sister, and I for editing.
So,
That's-
but unfortunately, the best biographer that I know is Carter. Anyone else?
I just want to say that in the memoir, one of the most amazing things to me to read in it was how she forged ahead as a woman in a time where a woman couldn't even get her own credit card.
Right, that's true.
And she just went ahead.
She had a father that stood behind her.
Yeah.
But you know, that's a story right there in itself, because I don't think people understand, I mean, no offense to any other rights that are being fought for, but to think that in my lifetime, I was 10 years old before a female, half the population, a female, could get a credit card or whatever, or get a bank loan. And I'm wanting to know who the bank officer is who sat there and told his mother, his grandmother, that her credit wasn't good enough to get a loan. Well, I fed you your whole life, I kept clothes on you, but no, you're not creditworthy. That to me is a wild story. 50 years ago, you couldn't go buy a car on your own, and now half the cars are sold to female, half the real estate is owned by females. I mean, it's because half the population is females. It's only logical. And that to me is just a mind-boggling story. And most folks, even in my generation, I'm 60-something, even in our generation, are not aware of it, because it just came about when we were kids.
Yeah.
So we always saw it. And now you hear stories like, oh, well, grandma was never in debt. She couldn't have been. Grandma didn't have credit cards. She didn't have the opportunity.
Right.
All right, well then, thank you all for coming. Thank you for, especially for our featured readers, for their sharing their experiences with Carter and sharing their favorite bits of her writing. And thank you all for coming.